Hi there. Hope you're well. Hope you're staying safe. This is Matt Hopper, co-founder and creative director at Trisonic. Trisonic's a specialist audio media buying and creative agency. Personally, I've been creating audio for brands for over 25 years. I absolutely love the medium, and I'm probably like you in delighting in its renaissance in recent months and years. We've heard a lot today about what makes audio as powerful as it is, how the audio landscape is shifting and is changing further in the wake of current events. And I hope it's convinced you that even now, or perhaps even especially now, if a brand doesn't have an audio identity, it really should have. Now, I pre recorded this session, but if you've got any questions along the way, I'm on the end of the Trisonic Twitter feed at Trisonic UK. So, what should a brand sound like? I thought I'd start with another question actually. How did it used to sound? It's very different now to the way it used to be, and here's proof.
Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, things go better with Coca-Cola. Mars Day helps you walk, rest, and play. It's called Toys R Us, Toys R Us, Toys R Us. A million house toys every day. Pick up a tin that beams and say, beams means Heinz.
Classics there, aren't they? Absolutely brilliant. All singing the brand name, all catchy tunes, but jingles back in those days used to be fairly campaign focused and for TV and radio broadcast campaigns only, with a pretty short shelf life in many cases. When the brand manager or the brand's agency changed, chances are so would the jingle. But things are a little bit different now. Audio is being consumed in many different ways, and listeners have become more savvy. So it's time for a different approach. But do you really need audio branding? There are plenty of brands that don't have an audio identity. Well, I would argue yes, obviously I would because I'm in the business, but here are a few reasons why. Commercial radio listening is on a roll. It's hugely popular, particularly now. Digital audio has been growing like topsy over the last few years. So streaming services and podcasts are hugely popular. So there's more audio out there, more places where you can hear it, but conversely, less places where your visual branding can be seen. Because of voice interaction, smart speakers and smart vehicles increasingly, screen time is reduced because we don't need to interact with a brand visually. It's done audibly. So it's important you can be heard. So yes, you really do need audio branding. What is audio branding? Big question. And a simple answer to that is everything anybody hears from your brand. It's not just a sonic, it's not just a jingle, it's absolutely everything that's communicated to your consumer or that a consumer hears in connection with your brand, even down to the spokesperson you put up for a PR interview. It's all part of your audio branding. And there are many tools in the toolbox to help us control that sound and shape the character of your brand. The Sonic, like the Intel Pentium processor, was the first and most famous. There are many, many since. So that's short little music stab that's going to stick in the mind. The music you use, the voice or voices that you use, the sound effects you use, and the words that you use. Not just the words, but the way that they're said. Hello Moto will never be said like that anymore because in our minds it's always hello Moto. I think you can probably tell why I didn't get that particular voiceover gig. So all of those are the tools in the box available to us. And I kind of devised 5 golden rules to help guide you through making and applying audio branding in terms of best practice. And rule number 1 is think long term. These guys didn't get where they are by changing their logo every 5 minutes. So you need to think the same way about your audio identity. Audio strategy should span 5, possibly 10 years or even more. The more you use your audio identity, the more famous you get for it, the more familiarity builds, and so on and so on. Rule number 2, be consistent. Apply it everywhere. Strict guidelines, just as you would have brand guidelines for your logo and visual identity, have the same for your audio identity. And think about all the possible touch points where the consumer may hear you and apply the audio branding consistently across them. And I'm not just talking about the obvious ones. I'm looking at in-app, Barclaycard, Mastercard are two financial brands that have recently had made a transaction sonic that you will hear if you pay for something using Barclaycard or Mastercard. It applies to a lot of brands that interact with their customers through mobile devices. Point of sale, is there an opportunity for your audio? Are you missing an opportunity to get your audio branding heard at point of purchase? Ambient is going to be huge. Outdoor sites, digital outdoor sites are increasingly being audio enabled, so there are speakers. And this is going to become massive. It's an extra added dimension to outdoor advertising. And then the obvious, perhaps more obvious examples like your on-hold messaging. Consistency does count. There's research from Ubiquity and Radio Center from about 19, 20 months ago, which shows that matching sonic properties across multiple media, in this case, TV and radio, boosts our ROI by up to 400%. So consistent application across multiple touch points really does pay dividends. Rule number 3, adapt. Adapting is important because what sounds right on that box in the corner of the room, the traditional radio, isn't going to be right for a podcast listener, for instance, who 85% of who consume podcasts through these things, through earphones. So it's a much more intimate listening experience. So you need to adapt your audio branding to suit the touch point. And here's a very good example from the French railway operator SNCF, who quite some years ago were forward thinking in the way they made and applied their audio branding. They started with the sonic. You may well know that, A, if you go to France a lot, and B, if you're a Pink Floyd fan, because David Gilmour, the lead guitarist from Pink Floyd, apparently goes to France quite a lot, heard that, rather liked it, sampled it, and it now forms the basis of the title track of his last solo album, Rattle That Lock. So what started as a brand's sonic has now made its way into popular culture, a huge extension, and very valuable for the brand too. So all the obvious places where SNCF applied that sonic were at the end of radio commercials.
Laissez la nuit vous transporter.
SNCF.
The end of TV ads.
I'm on my way now.
TGV, prenez le temps d'aller vite.
And here's where it starts to get interesting. Online for SNCF meant starting their own internet radio station, SNCF La Radio, which off-peak travel times was broadcasting music and during peak travel times was broadcasting valuable travel information for their passengers. The branding of this radio station was produced much as any radio station's branding is, but was all themed around the sonic.
L'info continue. L'information voyageur à votre service. SNCF, la radio.
And for SNCF, ambient means using that sonic where most of their customers are a lot of the time. So on board their trains and on the station platform. So your brand becomes known as much for the sound it makes as for what it looks like. So rule number 4, evolve. Evolution is vital if you're using that long-term approach of 5 to 10-year strategy. Don't stand still because it will start to get stale. So you need to evolve subtly as visual identities do over the years. And evolving audio branding is something McDonald's knows a lot about. They first used this Justin Timberlake, I'm Loving It melody about 17 years ago. They bought the track initially for one campaign. It worked really well for them. They took the melody from, or one particular melody from it, that became the McDonald's Sonic. But they knew they couldn't just keep it the same over those 17 years, so they played around with it. So a change of instrument, maybe just something as simple as that, a change of arrangement, of style, it's all part of the evolutionary process. And rule number 5, be unique. You really don't want your brand to sound like everybody else's. It would be like the audio equivalent of that, wouldn't it? And it would have the lawyers making an absolute fortune as well. They would have a field day, wouldn't they? Being unique also reaps rewards. The best performing brand uses the most unique sonic property. This was found again in Radio Center's brand multiplier study a little over 18 months ago. So some golden rules and some useful pointers there. But where do you start in producing your audio identity? Well, at Trisonic, we start with what we call the audio audit. So we take a close look at the brand, its history, its culture, its aspirations, its perception. We look at who the target audience is. We look at what the competitors are doing and listen to what the competitors are doing. We then take a close look at where we're going to be using this audio, across which platforms, where are the touch points, and then in the best case scenario will be creative testing as well. So we may produce 3 different music options and put them all 3 to a panel and optimize our choice before we go into full production. And the core of most audio identities is music, and there's one very good reason for that. Music is hugely powerful because music has a direct connection with the brain's memory and emotion receptors. We don't have to think about it. It's like when you hear a song that puts you back in a time and a place. It's like that, isn't it? It's instant. It's the same device, and it's very powerful when it comes to brand salience and brand recall. But what you need for that is an earworm, don't you? You need a melody that's going to stick in the mind. And what you need to produce one of those is a brilliant tunesmith. And I'm delighted by the wonders of modern remote working to introduce one of our composers, Johnny, now live from his studio.
Hello.
How you doing?
Nice to see you.
And you too.
Good.
So when it comes to creating a sonic and an audio brand, where do you start? How do you start?
I start by messing around with some different moods, some kind of chordal structure that I think I can get some sort of a melody out of. So and then I start thinking, okay, I might have something here. And then it hits me. I go, oh, that's the one. And there I have my melody. And that's something that's sort of hopefully will stick in the mind.
And if it sticks in your mind, I guess then you know you've got a good one, do you?
Yes, exactly. If I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and it's churning around my head, then I know I've got a good one.
So you've got the melody now, and it's when we start to look at instrumentation, I guess, where it starts to get interesting and we can shape the character of it a bit more.
Obviously, certain instruments have a particular character to them. So what I will do is experiment to see whether I can get, for example, some pizzicato strings to play that, which will be quite a jaunty sound. It's something that's light, it can fit that sort of joyful mood. So I might speed it up a little bit, the melody. And suddenly you've got that sound, that pizzicato sound is light and joyful. So that's one particular mood. That kind of thing. And then I might move on to, we might say, well, if we wanted something a little bit more somber or a little bit with more gravitas, what kind of instrument can I use for that? So I might pick something that's more classical, like a French horn. So and again in different registers. It has that sort of mellow resonance that we can apply to different things. So I'll be messing around with lots of different sounds and perhaps even building something like a bed where I want to pick something a bit more electronic. that sort of thing. So I've put a bed together here that will describe how that works. And we come to the actual thing.
Yeah.
And that gives you an idea of how many different styles and feelings you can put to one melody.
Yeah. So either for a different type of client or indeed to adapt. We were talking about adaptations earlier on, to adapt a melody that you use for the same client across different touch points. Actually, let everyone into a bit of a secret now. We've already used that melody. It's one we've made earlier for a client called OneCom. OneCom is the UK's largest independent business telecoms company. A big-ish company, but growing. They wanted to sound big, but they were people focused, so they wanted to sound caring at the same time. They wanted something that was they could adapt and use across multiple touch points. So we created a theme, and we're going to take you through just an excerpt from that theme. It was a long form theme. I think the original one was about 2.5 minutes long. This is much shorter, but explains the various. Johnny, just talk us through the elements of the OneCom theme as we go through it, would you?
Yeah, sure. So here we start with something that's very mellow. It's just picking out little bits of the melody. So I wanted to use something like a guitar to pick out that sound. That's joined a little bit by some keyboards. And now we start to get into the drive, like we were saying with that electronic piece. Now it's starting to build. And the melody is coming and being introduced. Now we have a break. It's starting to get more and more powerful as we're building up the track. Now this is a chance to sort of bring out a corporate sense, something that makes you feel that this company is really worth something. We've got a big orchestral sound and vocals with it. And again, horns introduced. Brings power and prestige. The big finale brings it all back down.
It's a big piece, and as I say, about 2.5, 3 minutes long initially. And an awful number of tracks in terms of producing it, in terms of multi-track recordings. 99 or so tracks were involved in that.
Yeah.
And it formed, that one theme formed the basis of all of OneCom's audio branding elements, everything from sonics to long-form pieces for all kinds of applications, all from that one piece.
The new name in Northern Ireland business telecoms is OneCom.
That's just one example, of course, and every brand has a different solution, but I think observe these 5 golden rules and you'll be well on your way to successful audio branding. And with many companies looking at what happens after the current situation and how they reinvent themselves and come back fighting, now might be just the right time to be looking at devising an audio identity for a brand, so that when we start getting back to normal, you can make the most of the audio medium and grab a bit more headspace for your brand. Thanks very much. I am still on the Twitter feed. If you've got any questions, at Trisonic UK, or you can email me at matt@trisonic.co.uk. Thanks a lot and stay safe.